to the Orgasm Hour, where we unlock orgasm together. We educate and empower you to access and unlock your orgasm with advice, scientific research, experts, and proven pathways to orgasm. So I'm your host, Dr. Suzanne Malvahill, clinical sexologist and orgasmologist, specializing in helping you overcome orgasm difficulty. I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Michael A. Schwartz, physician, philosopher, and co-author of Altered States of Consciousness as Paradoxically Healing, an embodied social neurosociological perspective. We'll dive into this beautiful chapter that they wrote together to understand some of the aspects about how altered states are healing. Welcome, Dr. Schwartz.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. So tell us about yourself. Like first, as I mentioned, in diving, I have a copy here, in diving into these altered states of consciousness, when you mention these moments when consciousness shifts and it can open pathways to healing, connection, and even transformation in some of our most intimate aspects of our lives, which is, on the Orgasm Hour, we're talking about women who have difficulty with orgasming.
Yeah.
Like, first, how you got into this type of research, and then tell us a little more about what you discovered.
Yeah. I'd also like to give credit to the co-author of the paper, Erin Mishara, my colleague. So I was a young medical student, and the Vietnam War was going on. And as a student, we learned that what we wanted to do was finish our training, because otherwise we would go right into the Army. But if we signed up as volunteers, they would wait until we had all of our medical training and then we could go in as doctors. So I did that. I signed up. And then there was a lottery, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get the Army or the Navy. And I got the Coast Guard Public Health Service.
Wow.
Didn't even know that was a possibility. Then there was a second lottery, and I got the National Institute of Health. I got
The
assigned
National Institute of Health, the
Right.
National Institute of Health, the NIH.
NIH in Washington, D.C. I was drafted into the most amazing laboratory in the world at NIH, run by amazing leader Richard Wyatt. And what they were doing at the time was studying psychedelics.
Interesting.
Psychedelics were legal. We could actually get volunteers to participate in studies.
Wow.
There was an ethical rule: you shouldn't give anybody anything you haven't tried yourself. So that was systematically organized in the organization. It was a very different time. And
So you were taking these psychedelics. What I'm hearing you say is, if you worked there, you had to try them out.
well, if you were going to give somebody something, the rule was you had to know what you were doing.
I don't know how it would. That
It was a
sounds
completely
okay.
different world. These things were legal, and that's what we were doing. And Richard was an amazing supervisor, an incredible boss. And basically, it turns out there are psychedelic substances in your own brain. And we were studying one of the possible psychedelic substances in our brain. It's called dimethyl. I'll shut that off. It's called dimethyltryptamine, DMT. You make it yourself. And the idea was, and this is probably still true, if you have a lot of these in your brain, you're kind of a wow person. Oh my goodness, I love that plant in back of you. What a nice. That's what you like.
So you can have a lot of this DMT.
You have a lot
And
of it.
obviously it's not illegal if it's in our own brain.
That's
But
right.
it is illegal if you buy it on the street.
That's right. It can cause problems. It can cause perhaps, our research was blocked. I'll talk about that in a minute. If you have a little bit, you're kind of very straight. Hello, pleased to meet you. Yes, here I am. That's what you're
Interesting.
a practical, pragmatic person. So, unfortunately, at one point, the government stopped our research. We got a letter literally from the President of the United States saying what we were doing was wrong, it was immoral, it was bad, it had to be stopped immediately. Tragic. because
Wow.
I think we still need to know more about these substances. Is DMT the main one in your brain? Are there others? The investigations are going on again. But we then went on to study DMT in cats because we could study
Oh,
cats.
because you switched from people. So before we get to the cats, I have one question. Can someone increase their DMT naturally? Like this person you were describing, like, we don't know about any correlations yet that I'm aware of about women, orgasmic women or non-orgasmic women in this
DMT.
DST, right? DMT. No, we're not aware. We haven't done that level research, but it would be very interesting to
Yeah,
know if it's something that can be stimulated within the body
yeah.
and facilitate orgasm.
I highly recommend the book by Rick Strassman, who actually did most of the studies on DMT for years later. Uh, I'm not sure what it's called. I'm so sorry. But
That's okay. We can add it in the notes.
Rick
We can,
Strassman
but Rick Straussman.
he's in New
Okay.
Mexico, and he did a lot of DMT studies. It turned out that cats loved DMT.
How did you know? Did they tell you this? Could they start talking like when they were on
They would get
DMT?
DMT, and they would spend their time enjoying themselves, chasing around imaginary mice or rodents or whatever. They
Really?
go,
So you could
"Wow."
really, and there wasn't anything there. Isn't that
We
interesting?
we were criticized because we did not have their permission.
From the animal
Yeah,
rights,
I
I would guess.
I don't,
Yeah.
God knows how it could have turned out, but it turned
Yeah.
out to be a very happy time for the cats.
And
And
how do they take this chemical? How was it administered?
we're talking about 50 years ago.
Injected or?
Not sure I remember that, frankly.
Okay, don't worry. Okay. I thought you were going to tell me something like I don't want to tell you what we did 50 years ago, but no worries how they got it,
Papers
but
online, it's failure to develop tolerance to DMT in cats. Because
okay.
what we were trying to study is, well, if you make it in your brain, do you get tolerant to it so it doesn't do anything? But it doesn't.
Fair
It's
enough.
reactive. And this is something we really should study. Of course, if you have too much wow, you could have mental illness. You could come up with, I mean, these are dangerous substances, and my advice is that there really should be supervision with them, having seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it's amazing how this is one way that we differ from each other.
So what, from the healing perspective, I mean, because what really attracted me, and actually when I was doing my dissertation and came across your research about altered states being healing, because my research was on cannabis and women who were using cannabis basically as a treatment for their orgasm difficulty. So orgasm is an altered state of consciousness. That is in the research, that we access an altered state through orgasm. Cannabis is an altered state. And women who are able to, in my study and in a number of studies, if they're using cannabis, even if they've never orgasmed in their life, many women are able to orgasm for the first time using cannabis. So how can that, like the healing aspect, if you can just tell us about like
Well,
how this kind of healing can take place, because I call that healing.
how I think about it, I don't really think about it as, it may be an altered state, but I think about it as opening the door to new experiences.
Okay. Well,
Orgasm,
the brain.
that's right, opening the door to new experiences, to a new world, and you go, wow.
Well, it is kind of like that. I mean, I do have to admit myself, having been an anti-cannabis woman for many, many, many years, having had one, yeah, I had one experience that I have talked about on another podcast, taking a hit of cannabis before a physics class, and I got high, and it wasn't a safe setting, to be high, to get this feeling in that kind of a physics class where physics was hard enough anyway. So, I just was, and I think there are, I don't say many people, but I know there are people who No, 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 not me. It's a not. I don't want to try that.
Yeah,
So how do you get to the wow?
yeah.
Um,
Well, you have to understand that our brain are all these wires and tangles. And based upon our experience, they wind up like a roadmap where things go down certain wires all the time, and they rarely go down other pathways. And then there are networks, major networks in the brain where everything comes together. So, for example, that's what trauma is like. You have a horrible experience when you're 16 years old. Now it's decades ago, but it's like it happened yesterday. And every time you go to the city, speak to your aunt, your uncle, have a memory, it comes back and it's horrible.
well, we can use this example with women who have had sexual trauma.
That's right.
Women who have had sexual trauma, they're with that might have happened 20 years ago when they were, unfortunately, it happens to children, there's sexual abuse. Okay. So what I hear is women will say, I'm with my partner and they get vaginismus where they cannot experience penetration or they can't even enjoy it, even though they want to enjoy it because they're with their partner, their lover, but they can't enjoy it because of what happened 20 years ago.
That's right. Because that major highway going to that intersection and that trauma comes back. And even in therapy, the danger is if you talk about it, it comes back. The more you talk about it, the more you think about it, the stronger it gets. So we're
That's
kind
a really interesting, having seen 4 sex therapists myself, thinking that sex therapy was going to be the answer for my own orgasm problem, talking about it, oh, well, the problem, but I didn't realize. So let's go move now to
so
cannabis.
there are
Like,
methods like tapping and higher states of consciousness, etc. But psychedelics are a major issue. What these substances probably do is dissolve a little bit these networks, allowing them to not be so strong and overwhelming and overpowering, and enabling you to set up other pathways. It's like that highway that you used to take to town, and it went by this factory and there was all this traffic there, and now it's obsolete, but you still have to go there. Now you've
right.
developed a new pathway. You have an opportunity to really see things in a different way. Now, there's danger here because if you dissolve these pathways too much, you might have psychosis because you might come up with the craziest ideas. So that's why I really believe one of the nice things about marijuana is that it's a low intensity substance. So we're not taking something that's going to go, wow, out of my mind. And the
Right.
other thing is, I really believe that if you're going to do this, you should do this with supervision. Find somebody like you who's going to take you through it. Start at a low dose, maybe even have an ineffective dose. Build it up slowly. Get
Right.
used to it. Learn how to live with a shift in consciousness. And then you come up,
Learn how that is that learn how to live with a shift in consciousness. Very well said.
and then you come up with these new pathways, and they include the fact that you can have sexual excitement. The ignorance about female sexuality is unbelievable. I'm a psychiatrist. I've spoken to a lot of people, even old friends from the past, and I know several people who were actually in the porno industry. And mostly what goes on in these films is all faked and edited and put together.
But I'm sure they're well versed in female orgasm.
Some of them are not. That's the amazing thing. Some of them don't even know what the clitoris is. They think
Well,
like
that's
men that vaginal penetration is going to turn you on.
wow.
They don't understand that women's anatomy, there's this little button, this little magic place that has so many more neurons than anything that men have in their penis.
Right.
It's just overwhelming. And that's got to be a part of sexuality. And in the ordinary act of sex, it doesn't even get touched sometimes.
Well, what they found too is we'll call it the button, the clitoris,
You have the button.
actually has extended, the hood of the clitoris, the head of the clitoris, the I can't even, the bulb of the clitoris.
Oh, yeah.
There's other Yeah, they just found the full, they used to think it was just that. And only in the last like 15, 20 years, an Australian um, doctor, actually a female Australian doctor, because she didn't see any imagery of the female anatomy, and that was her medical. That's what she did to study, and they found the full scope of the female clitoris, and it is much, you can't see it. It's internal, but we always thought, because that's, we even myself as a in eighth grade, or when we began to see the diagrams of the male anatomy, and for females, what we would see in school were the two fallopian tubes,
That's right.
the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the vagina. No clitoris. There was no clitoris in any of our learning. And they're still trying to get it into the books for the students, because I think female sexuality gets caught up in what you just talked about, it being related to pornography.
As a physician, as a psychiatrist, I can tell you, a lot of people can't even pronounce it.
Well, it's a pretty yeah. So so the reality is why this is called the orgasm hour is because there are still nearly, in my study alone, 52, the majority of women had orgasm difficulty during partnered sex. And that percentage has not changed since they started studying it. The one, Dr. Osmo Kontula, who's out of Finland, said it's been 50 years of the same statistic. The percentage of women with orgasm difficulty hasn't changed, despite the increases in masturbation or more sex therapists. That it hasn't changed. So going back to what you were saying, I wanted to bring one. I read your paper, and there was one thing that you talked about in the conclusion that I wanted to kind of mention the conclusion and then go back into the paper. So you said, one achieves integration in mental and physical healing, paradoxically, through first yielding in its loss in a temporary dissolution of self and the feeling of being in control in the altered state of consciousness. So tell us about that. I guess what I'm hearing is the dissolution of the feeling of being in control, because many women talk about, ironically, their struggle to let go of control, even though they want the orgasm. So how does this, it's almost like a catch-22. It's like an internal, they want it, we strive for this orgasm, like striving to study. It doesn't work like that.
No, because you have these pathways that you've developed over the decades of your life, and they're rather rigid. And if you dissolve them all the way, you're going to have a mental breakdown. So you're worried about that.
Right.
It's not going to come back.
Right.
So the value of what you're talking about is, first of all, you're using marijuana, which is a very weak psychedelic. You're not going right away to LSD or something like that.
Right.
And second of all, you have supervision. You have someone who's working with you. You shouldn't try this on your own if you're worried. Even if you're not worried, you're not sure what you're going to do. A little supervision can really help. And then as you get used to it, the dose gets bigger and bigger. And the pathways that are blocking, you can't work your way around them. The more you think about them, the more intense they get. They're there to keep you away from danger, and that's what your body is telling you. So with supervision, with trust, with confidence, you can gradually get into a state of letting go, and these rigid pathways dissolve, and you come up with new pathways, and all of a sudden, wham, it happens.
And that's kind of, yeah, I can just tell you my experience of using cannabis when I first started using it. I had a really hard time letting myself surrender into that altered state.
Yeah.
Like I literally had to hold on to the side of the bed. Like I'd be like, no, don't touch me. So it wasn't about like, oh, let's go have some sex. No, it was like,
because
I had a really hard time letting go of just, I could feel it wanting to happen, in the beginning, but my brain would not let, it just hated the idea of surrendering
That's
in the
right.
beginning.
Because these pathways are safety devices
Wow.
tended to keep you out of trouble. And back in the cave person days, cavemen, cavewomen, you really wanted to have pretty rigid ways of thinking and behaving.
Wow.
Because if you took one step out of the way, you're dead, you're gone. So you have to trust the substance, trust the person who is supervising you. It's not a big process. It doesn't take years and years, it's a short process. And then gradually increase the dose, and you come up with new ways of thinking. And you're not fighting against the old ways of thinking, they're just obsolete. They're not
Yeah,
important anymore.
I would say that's correct. I mean, it's,
They're gone. They
yes.
come from something that when you were 16 or 12 or even younger, something you learned, something you feared.
Well, I used to have anxiety attacks, so the idea of surrendering for me um, was scary. It wasn't a pleasant idea. To surrender was not pleasant. And
That's
I
right.
had to learn. And eventually I did learn, to use cannabis, to go into the state. They always say, having the right setting and the right intention, to use when using a substance like cannabis. Um, Now, I will say, on a related note of altered states, that there was work done in the 1960s for, we had talked about this a couple of days ago, where there were studies done with women with what was then called frigidity, who had orgasm difficulty, who took with supervision LSD and Ritalin, and they all overcame their orgasm problem.
That's right.
This study was done in 1965. It was published in Psychedelic Reader, and yeah, it was. I tried to contact John Buckman and Thomas Ling were the two doctors, but just like so, what I'm hearing you say is tell us about that. Like, so LSD is doing this. We know it's doing, and we know it's scientifically proven with marijuana in helping women orgasm.
Absolutely. DMT, LSD, all these substances probably work in a similar way at dissolving these networks, opening up to new ideas, and coming up with new networks. One
Okay, so
thing
they
about
work
marijuana is
similarly.
that it's not very powerful. It doesn't compare to LSD. You can increase the dose, you can increase the potency. If necessary, you can go on to something more, but I do advise supervision because the danger is you're going to come up with a whole crazy new idea too. That's what happens when
Interesting.
you take LSD. All of a sudden, you say, wow, that's incredible, and you have a wonderful experience. But you might say, oh my God, you're a Martian. Get away from me.
Yeah, I have not taken LSD. That the marijuana. I mean, I kind of grew up as the one guy asked me who was I had went on a date a couple I don't know 6 months ago with this one particular guy, and we both were graduated high school on the same time, and he goes, oh well, so were you a slut or a prude? And that was kind of those were the two choices, back in my day, and maybe it hasn't changed much because I do hear women on the thread. I'm on a thread called Becoming Orgasmic on Reddit, where there's now 37,000 women who talk about their orgasm issue. At least they have a place to talk about it now,
Yeah,
because before there wasn't any place to talk about it. There was no place to be anonymous and to talk, I have this problem. So but they're still here they are 18, 19, 20, becoming sexually active with an orgasm problem. Like, what, so they come out of our society, and I mean it's half the women are going to have the problem.
oh yeah, well, because we learn from, our heritage, our parents, and we learn to be, sexually cautious. We don't want to get pregnant. We don't want to get a bad
Right.
reputation. And like I said, the anatomy is just not well known at all. There needs to be education. And people don't trust these drugs. And they all know, everybody knows people who have had bad experiences. Uh, what we're talking about here is really a remarkable opportunity with supervision, with someone who knows what they're doing, with a therapist to give you this, get your trust, start at a very low dose. You might not even feel anything. You might say, then go up higher. use more intense, and focus on trying to, just open up your life to new ideas, learning about your anatomy, having your partner
Yeah.
learn about your anatomy. We are not there yet as a culture. We have all
We're
kinds,
trying. I mean, that's what we're trying to do this. You know?
and unfortunately, guys and gals get to be very good at faking things. Guys can't fake sex. That's a disadvantage. If you can't do it, you can't do
Well,
it.
yeah. But women, faking is a huge
Women
issue for women,
can
you
fake
know.
sex. That's right.
But
And
it sets not a good precedent for the relationship or the future, or giving the partner clues to what worked because they just gave clues to what actually didn't work.
that's right.
um
And then even over a long period of time, having that discussion, oh, for all these years, I really haven't enjoyed it. I've been playing with you. How do you say that?
do you know that I read it once on Reddit, a woman who had said that for 27 years she has been faking it with her partner, and I was like, I didn't have a comment. Like, I was just like, what can you say to that? Like, this is how she does it. 27 years of faking orgasm. I mean, I, I'm not here to change everyone. Our role is not to help everyone access their orgasm. Those who want it,
Yeah,
you know, those are the people that are going to be listening to this show, is the people who want their orgasm, who want the transformation.
yeah. Also, as you know, there are now some states where marijuana is legal, other states where it's not legal. But if you want to go through this process, it really is useful to have a guide, to have someone help
Yeah.
you figure out what the problem is, start at a very low dose, feel safe, feel secure, and wham bam, it's going to happen.
No, for sure. I mean, I've guided several people myself, several women through, after learning how to use it myself. I've guided women on how to use cannabis. Um, One was actually virtually, she was in London, and the other one was actually in person, with their first experience using it. And then we're developing training programs where they would access, go in with an intention, a pleasure practice in an altered state, for example. So clearing out the negative thinking, what negative thinking needs to be cleared out. Like, so, because the altered state has there's a different, as it doesn't think like the conscious mind. It's the conscious mind actually gets, I used to put, when I was going through the early stages of learning, and I was telling you in the beginning how I would just, God, I gotta can't, it's just difficult for me, was, I would put my conscious mind to be watching television. She'd be watching a good movie. So I could put her aside so that I could let the altered state actually, because I didn't trust it. I didn't know it, yet this was the place that was supposed to give me the orgasm, this altered state that I didn't know or trust.
Because that conscious mind is your roadmap that through incredible incredible
Decades.
centuries of, thousands of years of evolution keeps us safe. And to change that is so scary. And we all know people who have had problems with these drugs and it's ruined their life.
Right.
Jumped out
Right. You have that too. Yeah.
with a good supervisor who you can trust. You can talk to about your sexual issues. You can start with a very low dose and say, oh, this is okay. That was kind of interesting. It's like having a glass of wine. Then you can increase the dose. And then
Right.
as these networks dissolve, you form new networks. You don't need to drive that way anymore.
Right. You can drive a new way, and have new thinking and new beliefs. Yeah. Because you talked about healing,
Now you're looking out of the
also.
window for the first time and you're saying, wow, this is a really pretty place.
Well, then you know what happens. I can tell you what happens, and this I also hear from women, and it's happened to me. You end up have this orgasm, and then it's like, oh, I want that again. What was the recipe? How did I have that? And by trying to recreate the same experience again, the conscious mind is in it. Doesn't work. It
That's
it
right.
has to be. It doesn't work.
The conscious mind is saying, no, go down the safe old pathway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Avoid getting killed by the enemy tribe. It just brings you
Well,
back. And again, even talking about that same old pathway strengthens it.
it's such an irony. I mean, I know the struggle that these women have talked about because I've had it too, and the repeated, trying to have a positive way of thinking while the behavior is showing that it's the same pattern. So it's like how to change the behavior. You know what I mean? If they're failing, they're not having an orgasm or they're not enjoying the orgasm, yet their affirmations are saying, I enjoy great, you know what I mean? I have great orgasms. It's like you have to kind of override the negative thinking. Like one woman, for example, had said, I've always felt that I'm hardwired not to experience orgasm. And I said to her, well, if you believe that you're hardwired that way, your body then is going to respond that way. So her belief, that our beliefs actually also play a role. And I guess going back into this concept of the altered state, because you've mentioned also like with meditation, with hypnosis, there were other shamanic experiences that were also accessed through altered states.
That's right.
All of them seem to have with the focus of the dissolution of the self, the dissolution and the you called it the oceanic, like the connected with universal consciousness. So, going back to this woman who was saying, I feel like I'm hardwired this way to not experience this pleasure. I shared, well, your body is going to respond to that. Then you're not, she doesn't know why she's not feeling any pleasure, but she doesn't believe she's going to. So how can the chemicals, say, for example, someone, that's their issue. They believe that they can't have it. How would you advise them if...
You have to learn that your networks are your brain networks are a consequence of your past, and they have an evolutionary value to keep you safe. And that horrible experience you had when you were 12 years old is a huge warning sign. And if I tell you, I do not want you to think about a fire truck. Don't think about a fire truck. You're going to think about a fire truck. It doesn't work like that. You can't stop thinking, because to focus on stopping thinking brings back the image in your mind and strengthens that network. And you're stuck with that network. And it's there for a very good reason, to keep you surviving. But you can't say that not having an orgasm is going to keep you surviving. That's absurd. You just want to dissolve that network a little bit, come up with new networks, and go down new pathways.
Makes it sound easy. And you know what? Many women do.
It actually is. The amazing thing is, if you can find a trusting person who's trained. I think we need to train gals to
yeah, totally. Yep.
to work with these people and discuss what happens, and learn about these networks and understand it's just like a roadmap. We got to throw that map out and come up with a new way of travel, a new roadmap. And it's like, wow. And all that old stuff is just gone. You don't think about it. You don't say, oh, I'm so glad
That's true.
about those fire trucks anymore.
That is true. And that, to me, like when you talked about, what healing actually means, you talked about what healing means, that there were different meanings for healing in your paper, about there were spiritual meanings for healing. But what I hear is, like, I just use myself an example. I don't feel ashamed anymore or inadequate or, the old feelings that were, for me, associated with having an orgasm problem. I don't have the problem, and I don't have the feelings, the thoughts. It's gone. I mean, I would have never imagined all those years when I was struggling, with the orgasm problem, that I would one day be someone who would have been healed from them. And the irony is, it happened with a substance that I was never in my wildest dreams going to use. I was against this cannabis thing. So, yeah,
You've got to learn that we all have a history, that
right.
safety is important, and safety is drilled into our brains hundreds of thousands of years ago. So the world is different now. And bad experiences in childhood could just be bad experiences. Forget about them, move on, or minimize them, or learn what you need to from them, but not ruin your life. And it works for everything. This is a little irrelevant, but you might want to learn this. Do you know why guys are bald and not gals?
No, actually, I don't.
There's an evolutionary advantage to baldness for men.
Really?
Because back in prehistoric times, everybody was hairy, like apes. But that meant you wouldn't get sunlight, and that meant you would get vitamin D deficiency. When you were in your 30s and 40s, your bones would get weak, your muscles would get weak, your capacity to be a warrior would be gone. We guys were the warriors back then. So what happens is, if you lose your hair, the sun gives you all the vitamin D you need. It
Interesting.
makes you strong and tough. That's why so many of these wrestlers are bald.
Interesting.
It's associated
So what
with-
I'm hearing, yeah, the evolutionary
you
aspect.
learn that things have a history, and it's kind of amusing. So now I feel kind of happy.
You're part of history. So yeah, so these two, you talked about going back to this, like the dissolution of the self, this oceanic boundlessness that happens from taking, and it can happen through meditation, it can happen in hypnosis, it can happen in quote unquote altered states. It's not just.
That's right. But if you use a substance like cannabis, you vastly expedite and make the process simpler.
You expedite it. Okay. Tell us about that.
You have because that's what these things do.
They expedite it.
They
Okay.
enable you to have new networks. And remember, persons with high levels of these in their brain are imaginative, creative. Wow. Oh my God, that plant in back of you is so beautiful.
It's actually an Amstel. It's called a Ficus Amstel. Ficus is a Amati. I forget. I used to be in the plant business, not the cannabis business, but I was in the plant business. But I forget the name of this one. Ali. It's a Ficus Ali. That's
Yeah.
it. It's a Ficus Ali. Yeah.
If I had much of that substance, I would be preoccupied with it and couldn't pay attention to you. And if I didn't have any, I wouldn't even notice it.
Right. Okay. So if you had a lot of the DMT, you would, yeah. But I've seen that there are exercises that people
maybe
do.
DMT, it may be substances like DMT. This should be studied. Like I said, it was literally shut down by the government. I feel like writing a paper about that because they.
Yeah, we've never heard about that. I mean, I never heard about that other than through you.
And
That,
those were
this.
lab at the time, because I was the kid in the lab. I was the young guy out of the
Wow.
military, and they were
All that history.
a lot older.
Did any papers come out of that? Did any research papers actually get published through?
We have one about DMT in cats.
Okay, the one in cats that was published, but that I'm talking about with the humans. When it was done with the humans.
The group did a lot more publications. I was only there for 2 years,
Okay, but they were done.
but they were done.
So, but this integration, so when you talk about the
Zeros, the leader of the lab.
I was reading that you quoted Carl Jung in 1969. This transformation engages the deepest levels of self-processing. So are these all components of healing where we don't have that old thinking anymore? Like the whole thinking is gone. When there's an actual transformative experience that takes place as a result. And I'll just give you an example of a woman that comes to mind who I interviewed for my dissertation. She had been raped as a teenager. She could not orgasm through partnered sex or soloed sex. And she told me that she told her then partner, I have this problem, which I give her credit. She didn't go fake. We talked about that earlier. She didn't fake her partner. I have this problem. He said to her, try this. And he gave her a hit of cannabis. She orgasmed the first time she used it. They use cannabis before sex. They're married. They have teenage kids. They're cautious around their they're discreet as they're raising two children who are teenagers. But she said it completely transformed her sexual life. So, what I heard from her is kind of what you're talking about, in the sense that she had a healing experience. It wasn't just that she learned to orgasm. This woman transformed her whole experience of her sexuality had been healed. That's what I understood.
That's right. And that can happen. And like I said, the danger of doing these things on your own is that they have their dangers too. Again, marijuana is not a strong psychedelic. Small dosing, a trusting partner, someone to supervise makes a whole lot of sense. Going to somebody like you, trust.
Yeah.
And
well, and you're in Connecticut. You're the first state that actually, I petitioned, and with the support of my research partner for the Female Orgasm Research Institute, Dr. Jordan Tischler, who's based in Massachusetts, and Connecticut was the first state to approve female orgasm difficulty / disorder as a condition of treatment for medical cannabis. So someone in your state, woman in your state who has orgasm difficulty, is able to go to get a prescription for medical cannabis. And we're in the process of developing training programs to guide women, because they don't, I've heard from women that's like, I've never used it. I don't know how to use it. And what I've learned is that women that go off on their own and try to use it, because I've been in touch with them. For example, one woman contacted me after Connecticut became, and it was in the news in Connecticut, that it was in the back of the news article. It wasn't even autism and female orgasm difficulty got approved together, and female orgasm difficulty was not listed in the title. It was in the back of the CBS. It's our culture. I mean, I'm trying to help normalize that, just like it's normalized for males with erectile dysfunction, and the commercials on television. That's been, PTSD has also been normalized in a sense because of its acceptance in all the states. So that's a separate topic. I mean, we're running into some challenges with states approving it, I think, because of our culture.
We're in a transitional period.
Yes, but I mean, just knowing that Connecticut was the first and Illinois was the second, so.
Huge amount of cultural issues about talking about this. And we need, I really hope that the people who want to benefit from this get supervision and help, rather than doing it on their own.
Because they take too much. That's what I was getting into. This woman, the first time she took it, she took too much.
I don't quite understand what the goal is.
Well, this was a woman that hadn't orgasmed in 30 years. She contacted me and she said, I don't know what happened to my orgasm, but I haven't had one for 30 years, and I'm regularly having sex. And this is, so the first time was too much. The second time it wasn't enough. So when someone is actually part of a treatment program, with a protocol for training, then they can actually, because I myself, it didn't exist. I mean, the first time I took it, I took 3 hits out of a bong when I decided I was going to try it, back in 2018, and I took too much, but I will tell you that experience took me back to a time when I got to understand where I was abused in my marriage. Like, it took me back to an exact scene of what had happened to me and where I was, when he would say exactly what he said, because I believed I was crazy. Like, I got to a point in my marriage where I believed that I was actually crazy.
Well,
and
you could see how the evolution was making it simple and clear, so you'd have the right pathway to go down. And the marijuana was gradually opening up. Well, let's just really take a look at what really happened.
Right, but I wasn't even trying to do that. It wasn't my intention.
I know, but getting rid of those overriding pathways, which are just meant.
I was shocked. I mean, I have come to understand my, even 30 years later, my emotional abuse in my marriage, like I came to, through these experiences of being in altered states of consciousness, even, I mean, I'm talking about within the last few months, understanding exactly this, because this man who I was married to, and, you know, I have no harm against him. No, you know, there's no, it's resolved for me. But he was committed to the hospital that I went and worked in within a year after I went and did a cathartic, because I thought I was crazy, right? So I went and did a 400-hour internship in a mental hospital, and he was committed to that hospital. So the point I want to make is, as I got better, he got worse. He went into his, I somehow took on, which is, you know, it's almost like having a session with a psychiatrist. I mean, kind of what I went through. But
Yeah,
I took it on. I took his illness on.
actually, it's better than having a session with a psychiatrist.
I wasn't expecting to talk about this.
If we had a session and we talked about the experience, it would make the network stronger. We would just talk about it.
Wow.
And I would help you calm
Yeah.
down. Oh, but it's so hard to, oh, I hate to think about it. Or you might not even say that, but
I just feel like it's over. Like
that's
it's
right. It's gone.
it's gone. It's just a part of my past that I like,
Not that
wow,
important.
that did happen to me.
It's like when you were 4 years old and they took away those toys. I had this terrible
It's
experience.
gone. Right.
We all have a past.
We all have a past. So yeah, so cannabis for me,
We have a present.
we have a future too. That is so beautifully said. Really, Michael, doctor. I mean, I know I talk to you as Michael on the phone, but as my guest, I want to, you know, respect you as Dr. Michael Schwartz. I mean, you know, I have so much respect for you and for the work that you've done through your career, and recognizing these acknowledging and writing an entire paper about altered states being paradoxically healing. And for anyone who, you know, who wants to see or read your paper, I mean, we plan on having it, listing it, you know, with when we do this, when this does get produced and get published. But I will list it, share it here for anyone that's listening. It's called Altered States of Consciousness as Paradoxically Healing: an Embodied Social Neuroscience Perspective.
Yes.
And Dr. Michael Schwartz.
And there are several other papers in that series. And again, my partner, Aaron Mishara, I owe him a lot for working with me on this paper. And I especially owe Richard Wyatt, the lab chief, an amazing amount for bringing this on and working with it and putting up with the opposition at the time, which was really very tragic.
Oh, you had opposition.
Well, the government shut us down.
Well, the government shutting you down. I mean, that's about as extreme as I guess as it gets, right? When they shut your whole lab down.
He was an amazing, wonderful, generous, brilliant supervisor. And the time is now to give him respect and honor and make this part of our world of healing now.
Yes. Wow.
It's the best way, in my opinion, to dissolve these networks. But again, I highly recommend small doses of weak substances with supervision by people who know what they're doing. And just don't go out and go blow your mind and take a gamble.
Very well said. Well, what I'm hearing is that we can heal and we can transform through using these substances, and have a new future is what I'm hearing you share.
Yes, you wind up with a new future, a completely open horizon. That past experience is not something you want to talk about. It's done. It's over. It's in the past.
It's over. Yeah. And moving on. Yeah.
We've survived. Isn't it wonderful that we're here? Isn't it wonderful that you can enjoy your life and your partner and sex?
Well, and for the women that are listening, or their partners who are listening, who have struggled with orgasm, to know that, you know, it was something that I struggled with for 30 years. I sold my company in 2020 to go back to school to get my PhD after having, I don't want to say having orgasm, but having yeah, orgasmic energy being able to flow through my life, being able to have orgasm and be finished with the whole mental, am I going to have it? Am I, that whole, all the package that went along with that, to have that dissipate. And yeah, and then find out that other women were, it's statistically proven. I mean, it's not just like it's by chance
It
that
is.
it was, there's statistical evidence that it helps women orgasm and increases orgasm frequency, ease, and satisfaction, and not just my paper. And your paper supports us by saying these states of consciousness, they heal us.
Well, they can.
They can.
I think we're on the verge of a new era, and I'm glad that millions of people will benefit from this. Certainly the women,
Well,
also their partners. Wonderful.
well, I am delighted and so grateful that you took the time to come on today to the Orgasm Hour and be our guest. And if someone would like to reach you, do you want to share a way that they can contact you? Do you have a,
Well, they can email me
okay,
at drmikeblog@gmail.com.
okay,
Dr. Mike, M-I-K-E, blog, B-L-O-G, @gmail.com.
very good. Yeah, just in case, I mean, you're an expert in supervision. I mean, you know, you, if they want to contact you, you're available. And yeah, so we want to thank everyone for listening. Do you have any last, anything, any last words of wisdom or transformation you'd like to share before we close the show today?
Oh, I wish you all very well. I'll just tell you, obviously I ain't a kid no more, but I'm very lucky being a psychiatrist. I'm still practicing part-time, and bless you all, and go and thrive. And wham!
Well, thank you for joining us again, Dr. Schwartz, and for being here on the Orgasm Hour. So I'm going to stop the record, and then you can just stay here for just 1 second. Just 1 second here. Okay, so we'll just